Hi there, this is Ms. Cooper with a much requested tutorial on how to do letters using an isometric grid. So what I'm going to do to demonstrate is I'm going to use a piece of scratch paper. I made a hand-drawn little grid of squares on it because sometimes that helps me think this process through a little better. So I'm going to use a pencil for this, and then I'm going to go over it in Sharpie in just a little bit. Something you will need for this is some kind of isometric grid paper with triangles. I'll put a link to a place where you can print some and the description. It'll be the same place where I printed mine from. So first, let's start with a very common question. What do I do if I want to draw a letter that has a hole in the middle? So let's say you're going to do kind of a very blocky shaped letter O. So let's say we want it to be, reasonably tall and wide. We'll make it shaped kind of like this. This is more of a 0, but that's okay. And there's a hole in the middle. I like to draw it out on something with squares first because it helps me to remember how tall and how wide each part of the letter should be, so that it's a lot easier to translate onto our isometric grid. So what I'm going to do now is I'll keep this by for reference. I'll put it off to the side over here, and I will use the squares and I will count them for when I'm drawing it using my grid. So our letter O is 5 blocks tall. So first I'm going to start by centering it here, and I will make it 5 blocks tall. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm kind of taking my pencil back and forth over it just in case I mess up. It's also 4 blocks wide, and I'm going to have it facing this way. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks wide, and I will continue it up the side. I have other videos on how to do isometric drawings, so if this seems like it might be skipped ahead a little bit, it's because I have a couple other ones, but I do have a playlist that can help you find some beginner videos so that you understand some of the basics here. Now I'll cover that hole in the middle. It's 2 by 3 blocks, or it's just 1 out from the edges. So now we have a hole for the middle, and let's say I only want it to be 1 block deep into space. I'm going to carry that out 1 block deep. I will complete the depth of this letter, the side, and I'll complete the top. But there is one thing missing. The thing that is most challenging to remember when we're drawing something with a hole in the middle is, where do we put the line? Our brain knows that there should be a line, but where does that go? Well, in this part I like to draw little snowflakes. So we already have the vertical lines in this area. Awesome. We already have the line that is going this direction back into space. So to complete our isometric snowflake, we need this line that's right here. So this is the line that we will draw going backwards into space. We always do this from the corner. We need to go backwards. So that will complete our isometric snowflake, and we can finish up the side by drawing this part into the middle. So now we have it drawn out, and now we can be confident that we can go over this with something a little more permanent and easy to see. And our letter O will make sense in a 3D space, and then we can add shading and make it look that much more realistic. So that's what we do if we have a shape that has a hole in the middle. Now, what do you do if you have kind of a squiggly type shape, like a letter S? That can be a little bit challenging to think through. But again, if you use those squares first, it does become much easier. So let's say it's, again, going to be 5 blocks tall and 4 blocks wide that we have for our letter S. Well, let's start with the end of it. Let's make that only 1 block tall, because that makes our life a little easier. And we already know that it's going to be 4 blocks wide. Now we can go another 1 block down. We'll finish this off, but we won't go all the way till the end. We'll just end it right here so we can complete our side. And then we know it can't immediately go back because it'll be touching it, so we have to go down 1 more. We can draw it going off into space, and then we'll do something very similar. So it looks like our letter S is going to go down another 3 right here, kind of like this part did. And then we will do the same thing we did on the top. And we do this on this grid paper off to the side so that we can figure out how the letter is structured beforehand, because that makes our life a lot easier. So when we move it onto the grid, we understand what's going on. So now when we translate it, I'll do it the same way I did the O, where the letter is facing out this way. When we do the S, instead of immediately drawing one straight line to complete the whole letter, we're going to go in 1, 2, 3 blocks, but then we're going to stop because there's nothing here. We're going to pause in this space, and we're just going to draw one right here. We left ourselves that gap. Now at the bottom, we know that it is 4 blocks wide, so we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 triangles across. We can see it's 3 up, so we will go 3 up. And it does overlap right there. That's okay. We already know that's going to happen. And this is where we can start completing it. So we know there's a gap, and then there's 1. We can complete the top now, and it is still 4 blocks wide. It all makes sense. We'll go 3 blocks in because it's 3 here. So it's going to be 3 here, 1 down, 3 across, 3 across, 1 up, 3 across. And now we can take that S and push it backwards into space. So let's make it only go out 1 block, kind of like the O. So we will take it 1 back, complete the end. Now we're going to complete this side, and it might be confusing here, right? We need our isometric snowflake to remind us what's going on at the end. So we already have 1 line going down, and we have 1 line going to the side. So we need this line right here from the corner to go back into space. Same with over here. It might be kind of confusing. We already see something sticking out, but that's not the 3D part. If we started down here and worked our way up, I'll do it in pencil so you can see what I mean. It's kind of tempting to start right here and then work our way up to the top and then complete it. But that ends up making a trapezoid, and that's not what we're going for. Remember, this part needs to go back into space like this part did, where it bounces back up. So what we're really looking for is this kind of shape going back into space. And then we can complete the top of that letter S and erase this bottom part right here because we don't need that. The last part, again, let's think of our isometric snowflake. We have this one, we have this one, we need the last one. Starting from the corner, we go back into space, and now our letter S makes perfect sense. If it helps, we can quickly shade it in here. Let's make this depth part side a little bit darker. We'll make the top just like mildly gray. And that helps the letter S to make a little bit more sense when we've drawn it out. So now I'll take a last letter and I'll send that your way. What if we have a letter that has diagonals, like the letter A? How does that work? Well, what you can do is first, let's figure out how tall and wide we want that to be. We want it to fit inside this box here to be consistent with our other letters. Working within that space, we can figure out what we want to do. So let's say we want the top of our A to be about 2 blocks wide, and we want the bottom to be a certain width too. So let's say the bottom is this wide, it covers this area here. So we can make those dark when we're sketching it out. So we know that the letter A is going to touch these parts right here, and I know that I want a flat top to it right here. Now what we need to do is connect those diagonal lines. So I know that it's going to go up like this and down like this on these sides. Now I need to fill in the middle. So I know it goes halfway down, I think. I'll do halfway down here. And it goes up, and it goes up. And we'll draw a triangle halfway through each block here and on this point right here to make our letter A. So this is where things are a little bit complex when we translate it over to our isometric grid paper. So let's start with the easiest part, which is the bottom of the A, figuring out where that goes. So our A should fit in a box that looks more or less like this. We have it 5 blocks tall and 4 blocks wide. So it helps if we box it in first because that helps us remember where to put everything. So we know that we cover these 2 blocks right here very neatly at the bottom. So we will fill that in real quick, right here and here. We also know that it covers these 2 blocks at the top that are in the middle. So skipping the ends, we will just do these 2. The next part is adding in those diagonals. So this is a time when you actually do not perfectly use the isometric grid, or you are using it perfectly, but rather you're not following an exact line. We know that this point here has to connect to this point here, and it has to just go off into space for a moment to do that. So we are just going to connect those dots without worrying about the grid, and same on the other side. We actually will not worry about the grid, we're just going to connect them. Next, let's form this little arch at the bottom. I go halfway through some of the points, another odd part. So we know that we're halfway through this second block from the left here. So I'm going to put a dot in there so I know to connect it, because we are like 1.5 across and 2 up. So 1.5 across, 2 up would be right here. Same with the other one. We'll put it right there, and then we can connect. It means that we're not on the grid for a sec, but we return to the grid to complete this bottom part right here. The last part is the triangle, so we're still paying attention to where our dots are. This is 1 row down, and it's right in the middle from our box of 4. Remember, we have that box up here. And then another dot connection here. We're halfway through the ones below it, so we connect those. And now we've drawn the front of our A. This is where it kind of goes back to normal. We're taking it backwards into space. So let's take it 1 backwards. So we'll go 1, 1, complete. We'll take it 1 backwards. And now we kind of have to get away from the grid, kind of like this diagonal here. We're just going to connect the dots and not worry so much about the grid. We're going to take this part back in space. And we can't really worry about the grid again. We have to just make it parallel to this line here. And that will complete our letter A. We can barely see this part in the middle, so we still follow the grid, but it's a little bit different in the middle. So that helps us complete our letter, and then you can go back and erase that box that you drew to get that diagonal letter in there. Some other common letters that might go off on diagonals are things like the letter R. So those are some examples of how you can tackle those kinds of letters when you're doing an isometric drawing. Thank you for watching, and let me know if there are any complicated letters you have questions about, and I'd be happy to answer those. Thanks for watching.